Hi, guys.
Hi guys, welcome back to the Jacuzzi Girl Show. My name is Janya.
I'm Estella, and this is our book club episode. Um, I think we introduced this concept in the first episode, but every month we want to review a fun or controversial book and give our opinion. And this month we decided to do the Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus by John Gray.
Yes, we chose this book because in the past we have reviewed a dating book before that has received a lot of popularity. And on that note, since February is all about Valentine's, we decided why not read. Um, I would say it's quite an old school book, as in it was published before we were born. But why not read one of the classics as classics for the relationship genre? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just to recap, the book Johnny is referring to, that the episode that had a lot of positive attention from season one, is the Why Men Love Bitches book by Sherry Azaroff. Yeah, brilliant book. Go listen to that episode. But today we're doing Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Jania, do you want to introduce the book and kind of the core concepts for anyone who has not read this book?
Yeah, basically, the introduction of the book starts with the fact that men are actually from Mars and women are from Venus. So, at one point in history, we used to live on different planets. And that's why our understanding of each other and our way of servicing each other, like helping each other, differs a lot. And in the past, there was even a dictionary for Venusians and Martians where they could go into the dictionary and see a definition of what their Venusian or Martian counterpart was trying to tell them. And but then at one point, the Martians saw through their telescope these beautiful Venusian women, and they built a spaceship to come to Venus and basically get into relationships with these women, and then they both settled on Earth. And the book explores basically how women in some ways are built differently and how men perceive things differently as well. But to preface is that all of us have male and female sides to us. And as he wrote, Asel and I were briefly mentioning this before, as he wrote, when you're single, you kind of have both sides of them in balance. But when you're in an intimate relationship, that's when you see more of what he means when he's talking about styles of arguing, styles of communicating. What do women actually crave in a relationship versus what do men actually crave? And as I was reading this book, I was literally reporting to my boyfriend, like chapter by chapter. I was like telling him insights from this book. And what's crazy is that the next day he was like, Janya, he had like a work conflict with a colleague, and he's like, I employed your what you were talking about woman, and I just like validated her feelings, and it basically worked. And he's like, now I got the green light to do what he needed to do. So that it
Wow.
felt good that my Martian actually listens to what I have to say. And well, we can dive into the concepts that we read in this book and what we agree and disagree with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jania and I were talking about this earlier. So when we were reading this book, she was like texting me like, "I'm making all these notes. Like I'm so interested." And for me, maybe it's because I'm single. I didn't really relate to this book that much. I was a bit like, I mean, I get why it has credibility in a lot of ways, but for me, in a lot of ways, I don't know if you felt this, but I felt some of it was obvious and almost condescending and insulting. That was my take. Like a lot of things I read and I was like, "Oh, I agree," and some of it I was like, "Oh, this is so insightful." But some of it I read and I was like, "Is this guy for real? Like what? Like why am I reading this? Like this is so obvious and stupid." Or some of it I felt like was very stereotyping women and men and oversimplifying them. But that was my opinion. And I was trying to remember things from my like previous relationships, and some of it I do vaguely. It's so funny, you forget so much. Some of it I do remember and relate to, but a lot of it I don't think I resonated with the book as much as you did.
I think the reason why I resonated with the book is because I did not really, when he would talk about males or females, I would kind of apply both to myself depending on what he was
Hmm.
saying. Let's say even like styles of fighting. I think maybe in styles of fighting, I'm more like a Martian than a Venusian. And Arjen is more calm and he's like, it's okay, like everything's gonna be fine.
Hmm.
And I think what he was saying, I was more taking it as basis for human nature and communication between humans rather than between genders.
Yeah.
But I would say that anybody who is in a relationship should read this book because, and
Hmm.
don't take everything, let's say, that he says about Venusians as you are. Maybe there are certain traits that Martians do that really
Yeah.
describes you. Let's say for me, I realized that I have a, okay, so actually we can talk about one of the
Yeah.
concepts. So Martians are they when they talk about problems, they only want solutions and they're about problem solving. Women tend to talk about their problems to get rid of the stress. I
Yeah.
actually found myself relating to both of these because I realized, let's say, when my parents tell me problems, I immediately take it on my address and I immediately try to fix it for them. Versus, let's say, when I'm in my intimate relationship, I do find it that I need to talk through all my problems and all everything that's stressing me out, just to for him to listen and understand how I'm feeling. But I find that he also does the same for me. Like, as in, if something's bothering him or if something's happening, he might retreat a little bit, but then he comes back and dishes it all out. So,
Yeah. So
no.
the basic premise that like Jania explained it really well and like realistically. I think in the book he is a bit more black and white. He basically says when men are stressed, they withdraw into themselves and they don't want to talk about it and they just want to find a solution. Um, Whereas women want to talk about it and let it out, and they're not necessarily looking for a solution. Um,
Yeah.
so
But see, like that's the argument that he made. But for me, I took it and I'm like, oh, interesting. Well, when my parents ask me something, or when my mom complains about her problems, I immediately feel the response that I have to fix them for her. And I don't know what kind of
mhm.
like maybe that's already a child parent relationship situation that we have to read about. But I thought about that. I also have that trait, or like even if my siblings tell me a problem or anybody in my life, I realized that instead of maybe empathizing as a woman to a woman, I tend to be like, okay, Estella, how can we fix this for you? You know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
I completely
Yeah.
agree. I think it's interesting though because I one thing I will agree with his book, even though I said it was a lot of it was insulting and stereotyping to me in my opinion. I think that he does kind of I think the way he conveys what women want and what men want, if your roles are reversed in a relationship, then that's a big issue. And I've seen that happen. So I thought that was really interesting. Like I've seen relationships where the woman is more stoic and more put together and she's not as emotionally charged and wants to constantly talk about issues as much as the man. And I think, in my opinion, I think that's a sign of an unhealthy relationship
I think
because your roles are reversed.
I could see how that could be a thing, but usually a woman becomes strong and stoic when she does not receive enough from her male counterpart. Be-
Exactly.
because at the end of the
Exactly.
day, what I liked about the book is that, yes, in some ways you say it's condescending, but in other
Yeah.
ways it simplifies human nature. Because after I'm in a relationship now for 2.5 years,
Yeah.
obviously it's not the longest span, but I would say we have a pretty good relationship. And I realized that at the end of the day, all of my frustrations, maybe problems in the relationship comes down to very basic things like I just want to be loved more in this moment.
Mm.
I need more reassurance right now. Or like I need my feelings to be validated at this moment. And for him, it's more like I need to be appreciated and needed. And I swear to God that that's what actually it stems down to. Well, also, we can talk about the point system later on because I
Yeah.
feel like that's so valid, especially in Kazakh households.
Yeah, I actually thought it was universal, but I've never thought about it that way. We'll get into it. But I think one of the things one of the basic concepts that he also talks about is the needs that men and women have. So men have a need to be needed, and women have a need to be cherished. And I think that is really, really true. And that is something that, again, as Johnny said, I think if your roles are reversed, then that means you guys aren't really fulfilling each other's needs. And it's a problem. Like, if you are a woman and you're constantly trying to help out a guy and try and fix his life and find solutions and be needed, I think that's not healthy. I think it's the guy's job to do that. And on the other hand, if a guy constantly needs reassurance and wants you to, tell him how amazing he is, special, and, cherish him, that's also concerning. Because that's kind of what women want in a very simplified way. It's true.
Also, one of the concepts that I wanted to bring up is that how we cannot tell men or criticize them, because not criticize them, but it's more like when we bring up problems that are in our
Mm,
relationships, they take it as for themselves that they're not worthy and they're completely useless,
yeah.
and they escalate it to that extent.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then when
100%.
but then what's funny is that when he was providing examples of how to phrase certain things, he was like, I don't like the shirt you're wearing. Maybe you should try another shirt. And I'm like, wait,
Yeah,
but
when
how is that
he
not direct like criticism, you know? If anything, I'd be like,
okay,
oh, that color is weird. Or did they iron that shirt? Or maybe like you should wear the other one that's more ironed, you know? Like that's how I would probably approach it. Not being like,
no, that's
no.
I think that's the issue I had. Some of the direct quotes he proposes you do, I was like, who would ever say that? Like, that would be so rude and
Yeah.
weird to say. Like, I don't like the shirt you're wearing. I just wanted to let you know. Like,
Yeah.
how's that better? I think a smarter way, and something like Sherry from Why Men Love Bitches would say maybe, is like, oh, remember that shirt you wore? Like, so basically, another shirt that he has, you say, I love it when you wear it. So that you basically condition him to wear the other shirt more.
Yeah. Or basically through a praise, which he does say that men usually react when you praise them on certain subjects. But
Yeah.
also, what was contradicting is that he was saying how Martians, since they do not really seek help, if you want them to help you, you have to ask them for help. But then, earlier in the chapters, he says that a woman should not make like direct demands because a man does not want to follow demands. He wants to follow like praises and feel as if he's coming to it into his own. And I thought that was a bit contradicting because even in his examples, he's like, I need help with this or I need this, versus before he'd be like, oh no, but just praise him on what he's doing already well. Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
I completely agree. The other chapter, remember, kind of on the similar note, is he's like, when you constantly, if you ask your man for a favor to help you out and he says no, you should just accept it with grace and not say anything. And then the second time you ask him for help, if he says no, you should just accept it with grace. Because then third time you ask him, he is gonna feel so obliged to you for not making a big deal about it before that he will help you. And you will score points because you were so cool about it. And that's where I disagreed. I was um, like, if
Yeah.
if you can help me once, okay, fair enough, maybe. But he's kind of like, you should just accept that if you could help you, he would. And I was like, okay. Second time, third time, okay. By the third time, I would be like, dude, like, if this is my partner, I would be like, dude, like,
You
you
would
need
be
to help me
you would
out.
be frustrated.
Like,
Talking about that, by the way, and asking for help. Basically, in the beginning, he also talks about Venusians were depressed on Venus because on Venus they were taught to serve each other, and they were taught to nurture and care for each other. While on Mars, men were more selfish and they would only serve themselves. So when men came to Venus and met these Venusians, they were happy that they found somebody else to serve and fulfill and give, versus women were happy that they finally got to relax. And the best
yeah,
way a man can alleviate a woman's stresses is doing things on his own for her without her
yeah,
having to mention it 100 times. Or let's say in my situation, I don't mind mentioning it, but it's nice that he's very perceptive to it. Let's say
a hundred
I don't
percent.
like washing dishes. Like that's not, but I don't mind doing anything else in the house. He knows that, so he always washes dishes for me. Thank you very much. At this point, since it's been uh
Yeah,
like since we've been dating a while, he already knows like what the protocol is if I cook for him and
Yeah.
if we're together in my apartment or his. So that's nice.
Yeah,
And
no,
yeah.
I agree with that. But what I'm saying is, if I ask you a third time and you're not going to help
Oh,
me, I
yeah.
will be frustrated.
Yeah.
I don't care what John Gray says. I will be frustrated and I will not be graceful and nice.
So basically, then he talks about what usually happens in relationships. And most of his examples were this: when a couple gets divorced, the woman is like, I give, and I don't get anything
Yeah.
in return. The man's excuse is, no matter what I do, she is never happy. So
Yeah.
basically, women in general, we automatically carry this load and we automatically complete things for the ones we love. So we expect the same in return. Versus for men, they have a different approach. Let's say, even with the point system that we'll mention later. And when a woman does not feel that she is being given anything and is not being taken care of, that's when she becomes compulsive and aggressive and she
Yeah.
feels overwhelmed and tired. Versus if he was like, don't worry, I have this handled, or what do you need me to do for you today, would change the whole situation regarding her attitude towards you as a man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, One thing I wanted to talk about because you were having you and I were having this conversation before, and I told you save it because it was really good. Is the concept, and I agree with this by the way. The concept that men, he basically says, men are like rubber bands, and or like men go into a cave, and women are like waves. Um, so I'm gonna explain maybe the men concept. Do you want to talk about the waves concept because I think you had a really interesting take on it?
Yeah.
So when he says men, are like rubber bands, and is basically when men are stressed, they go into their caves and they retreat and they kind of withdraw. And similarly, he says a lot of times what happens is when you start becoming more close, more intimate, they can also retreat and kind of isolate themselves and withdraw. And they're like a rubber band. Basically, there's only so much they can expand and kind of withdraw before coming back. And women should just let them do it, not basically panic and see that he's withdrawing and, trying to get close to him because that will only push him further away. Let him do his thing, like basically reclaim his independence or whatever, or deal with the stress, and then he'll come back to you. And I actually agree with this completely. I think that it's so true. Like you cannot pursue somebody when they're trying to get not get away from you, but when they're trying to isolate themselves, the last thing you should be doing is pressuring them to get closer, especially men.
Yeah. I also agree with the man key theory. Um, but I also think that to an extent, I have it as well. Like when I get overwhelmed, I also need to go into my cave. I
Yeah.
don't need you to be um, I don't need somebody to be around me all the time. I need to sometimes maybe go away, come to my senses, and then come back. But for
Yeah.
men, apparently that's how they deal with problems. And I did notice it in my day-to-day life, let's say with my male colleagues, with Artian, I tend to talk through the problems, and that helps me relieve the stress by sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Men don't really share problems unless they are seeking advice or they want to get help to get the problem solved.
Yeah.
So that's why, let's say, I do notice my relationship when Arsian wants to retreat. I know it's not related to me. I know it's related to him. But usually he comes back within like half a day. Like he needs just a few hours. He goes away and then he comes back immediately and happier than ever.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so regarding the woman wave, this was actually probably the only truth element that not true, but I think it was the most profound thing for me that I found in the book. So we as women, we go through waves. We go up and then that's when we're loving, nurturing, we're having the best time. We're kind of like all lovey-dovey and just happy. And then we reach the peak. But whenever we reach the peak, what comes up has to come down. So the woman starts coming down, and that's when she starts to notice all of the maybe negative aspects that happened to her when she was coming up, but she just wasn't paying attention to. Or that's when usually like problems that she did not address before surface for her. And the reason they do is because when she comes down, she starts feeling a sense of emptiness. She can be empty, overwhelmed, tired, sometimes depressed a little bit. And it usually happens in cycles of 21 to 28 days. When I brought it up to Arsian, he's like, so basically like your period, right? I'm like, Arsian, doesn't have to be my period. It can be like the cycle could be at any time, the wave. And what I found interesting is that when I was reading that, I was like, oh my God, I think I'm going through a wave when I'm down below. And I could never explain it why at least once a month, I was feeling very low about myself. I was feeling very negative, and then it would take me a few days to recover, and then I'm back to normal and I'm ready to work again. And during these few days, I would bring up problems that we've had for like forever, and per facto, I don't think there are. I don't think they're actually, in actuality, I don't think they are actual problems. I think it's just something that I hyper focus on because I'm not feeling good about myself or not feeling good mentally. And when a woman is down during her wave, she needs reassurance and more love. But
Yeah.
usually, what happens, a man is like, oh, she's very upset about something or she's feeling low. I'm going to leave her alone in her cave and she will come out and recover. Because that's how he deals with stress. What ends up
Yeah.
happening though is that because he approaches her that way, and versus she needs love and reassurance, even though she might be feeling crazy at that time, um, she ends up feeling resentful because she did not get to share her feelings, and he ends up not understanding why she's always upset about the same things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's that's interesting. For me, the most profound part was the point system because I've never thought about it. This is the one part where I was like, "Oh, I never knew this about men, but I can totally see it." So the point system is basically how we the different things that we value and we do in our relationships, how we value them differently. So, for example, a man will he for some reason thinks, and I've seen this as well, so this makes sense, if he does something big for you that scores him 30 points with his woman rather than doing something small that scores, let's say, 1 point. What he doesn't realize is that women cherish all of these acts equally and it's just 1 point for everything. So whether you give her 100 roses or 1 rose, it's all 1 point. It's about consistency. Whereas for men, it's different. And I do you want to elaborate on it? Because I actually feel like maybe you have a better take on it.
As we mentioned regarding the point system, in our relationship, it's all about give and take, and depending on what you do, women count points differently than men do. So for men, it's about doing the big things around in the relationship, buying a new car, paying for a vacation, uh, buying a big present, and they think that their job is done of giving. For women, they do not see it that way. As Estella mentioned, we see it in a points-based system where 1 point is one action, regardless of the size of it. Even
Yeah.
though, obviously, that's not to say that we do not value big vacations or stuff like that, but it's portrayed in an example like this. A man who goes to work, a lot of times he thinks his only contribution to the family should be financial and everything else should be on the woman. He thinks that he did his main big thing of the day versus when he comes home and the woman is still running around, let's say at that point she's a housewife with the kids. She's feeling overwhelmed and she starts getting resentful towards him because she feels that at this point, their point system throughout the day, he has 1 point for going to work. She has 20 points for doing everything else that's related in the house regarding kids, household, and etc. And what men need to understand is that a woman is much happier when he starts doing small things for her, whether that's washing the dishes, taking out the trash, looking over the kids, letting her have time for herself, and she will then feel that the points are in balance. For the man, he thinks, well, I'm also giving a lot, but what he doesn't understand that for a woman, it's more important the small acts of kindness and service that she receives throughout the day, rather than just one big financial thing. Because at the end of the day, that's not doesn't correlate to her happiness.
Yeah.
Or I also I also wanted to bring up the point of how he brought up an example of how when he used to work a lot, the woman said, "No, I'd rather you spend. I don't want you to come depleted and dead every single time you come from work. I want you to spend time with me. I need to communicate with you and have this relationship." And I thought that was interesting because at one point Arsian was working a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't, and he would come home, but he was already so tired and moody, he didn't have energy left for me.
This is
And then I
Jania's
had to,
boyfriend, by the way.
yeah. And then I had to explain to him, being like, listen, we're still in a relationship, and a relationship is also a job. So you have to be willing to contribute. Next time, do not be this tired, because I want to talk and I want to communicate. I'm also tired from my work, but nevertheless, I make sure to leave energy and space and grace for us
Yeah.
to communicate and catch up on the day. And after that, it was, he understood, and it was much better.
Well, I would say the crux of basically the point system and something that you need to understand, like basically men need to understand women want consistency, doesn't matter how big or small. And for women, what they need to understand is that men put a lot of effort into big things. So if he does something big for you, just acknowledge it and appreciate it.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. And I think that we touched upon so many things because this book is obviously has a lot of different components to it, but overall, what would you say you disagree with and what would you say you agree with?
So, what I disagree with, I don't think I disagree with a lot of things, because still found truth in a lot of the things that he brought up. What
Yeah.
I do disagree with is his writing style. And the way he would, like, at one point at the beginning when I opened the book, I was like, oh, this is so easy. Estella, it's going to be so easy to read and so fast. I get down to like 25%, 30, because I read it on my Kindle. I'm like, okay, cool. Then I get to 40, 50%, and I'm realizing I cannot keep reading this anymore. Like, his reasons, examples just drag out too long, and he repeats the same concept over and over and over again in one single chapter. So then
Yeah.
by the time it was 60 and 70%, I just checked out of the reading the book and I put on the audio version. I also sped it up times two, just for it to, like, for the information to get to me faster. So that was my only complaint with the book. But what I did like about the book is that I like that he pointed out certain communication styles. Let's say I do this myself. Like, I tell Arsian, being like, we never go out. When in reality, and he's like, but we do go out. We went out last week. But that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say, I want to spend more time with you because I miss you and we haven't seen each other. Or I just want to go on a date with you because I like spending time with you. And how he brought up that we should not use, whether it's regarding him to me or me to him, like words that are saying like never or you always do this, because it isn't true. Like, we do it sometimes, we don't. But it
Yeah.
was funny because a lot of the examples, I was even reading them to him in the car, and I was saying, like, and we were laughing because a lot of them is so true. Like, or recently I've been realizing I was complaining about a problem and I was like talking about it and talking about it, and I know that when I rant, yes, it can get tiring, but then at the end he was just quiet. And in the book, it said, but when the man does not respond at all, that means he did not hear you and is like kind of invalidating your experience. And I was like, and then he's like, okay, let's sleep immediately. And I was like, what? No, and I literally turned to him and I was like, we're not sleeping. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I literally just spent 30 minutes talking to you about like my own personal trauma stuff. And then you're like, okay, let's sleep. And he's like, no, but I heard you. But like, he's like, I just don't feel like, I just don't want you to get more upset by talking about it more. And I'm like, I talked all this time for you to validate me, for you to hear me. And then he's like,
Yeah.
and then we spent like 10, 15 minutes more. And he's like, yeah, you know what? You are right. That's crazy. Um, like, can't believe that happens, and I was like, okay, fine. Now we can sleep.
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to preface, by the way, Jania's boyfriend is amazing. He is so romantic and just emotionally mature. So I can just totally see him like getting it immediately and not
Yeah.
being like a lot of men who are stubborn and would be like not getting it, you know?
Or it's like, when in the book it said that men don't really know how to apologize because men only apologize
Yeah.
when they think they're wrong.
Yeah.
Arsene learned with me, like, or maybe he had it in him before. What I like about him is that he's very quick to take like note of what you said and then put it into action. He doesn't disregard what I have to say. Thank
Yeah,
God.
he's like very emotionally mature.
Yeah. So he doesn't perceive it. And let's say now when we argue, he will always apologize first, even if I might have been the crazy one. And I appreciate that a lot about him, actually.
Yeah, no, I think
Yeah.
that's, by the way, I think that's a really good rule for relationships. Even if you're wrong, the man should always apologize first.
Yeah, like hell
Honestly.
man. Yeah.
Okay, so well, as I said, I think for me, a lot of it I didn't relate to, but maybe it's just the stage of my life right now. A lot of it, like what I disagreed with, I think was just the very black and white gender stereotyping. So, do I agree that men, when they're stressed, withdraw more, women need to talk more? Sure. But as you said, I think most people are a mix. So, like, when I'm stressed, I will withdraw and I just want to be by myself. And then when I'm ready, I do want to have one or two people that I can talk it out with and just let my frustrations out. But it's not like I'm going around and like I want to talk about it. That's just definitely not what's happening. And I agree with you 100% on the writing style. Oh my goodness. To me, some of the things that it was so repetitive, it was so obvious, I almost felt insulted and it was like condescending. I also switched to the audiobook on Spotify, which you get for free if you have premium. And I also put it on 1.5 because I was like, I do not want to feel like someone's lecturing me. It's just his writing style. I think it's very, I don't know, it's particular and it comes off very condescending, at least to me. I literally went to look when this book was written. I was like, oh, it was probably written like in the 60s or 70s. It was written in 1992. It's not even like that long ago. So, yeah, for me, it was a bit, I don't know. He oversimplified women a little bit for me personally.
Hmm.
What I do agree with is I agree with the overall themes of women need to be cherished, men need to be needed. I agree with the point system. I've never thought about it, but it makes a lot of sense after I thought about my own personal experiences and, like, my friends, family, everything I've seen. I think it totally makes sense now. And it actually, how do I say it, explained a lot of situations in my life where I was like, oh, that makes sense? And do I agree with? Oh, I actually really the one thing I liked. I don't know how men would view it, but one chapter where he basically says the little things. He basically lists out all the different little things you can do for your woman to gain points.
Yeah, 100 things
I
that's on the
liked
list.
that. I
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
liked that. I was like, oh, that's sweet. I would totally like make my boyfriend read that or like send it to him and be like, here's some ideas.
Yeah, that's a good. Actually, at that point I was ready it was already an audiobook version and I was thinking
Yeah.
I was like I need to find that spot in the book so I can show it to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And and obviously I think I this is not something I've put into practice, but I think I agree with it when you said it. When you communicate, don't be absolute and don't be petty and don't be naggy.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Also, Sasel, do you agree on this? Because I think I do, that men are inherently born selfish and women are inherently born kind of serving to others as an automatic feature. And we need to learn with age to be happier. We need to kind of pull back and learn we need to give. And men need to learn to give more to feel fulfilled.
Yeah, I agree with it. I think I think maybe also like from a biological standpoint maybe because women obviously have children and it's like
Yeah,
inherent, that we have to take care of someone in us.
we automatically go into a mode of giving to a child who's
Yeah.
helpless. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do think there's something there and this is something I think a lot of women, modern women struggle with is we're so taught to be independent and self-sufficient, but you really need to and this is something I'm working on as well, so I'm not, saying I'm perfect, but you really need to let the man do things for you and be needed and stop doing so much.
And also, when you do let him do things, let him do the things his own way. We as women
Yeah.
tend to be a bit crazy and we're like, no, you should do it like this, you should
Mm-hmm.
do it like that. Just if you just relinquish everything, yes, it might not be perfect. Yes, it might not be exactly how you want it to be, but it would still get done in his own way. And that's also good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. 100%. That's a really good point. And I don't know, let's end it on would you recommend this book?
I I would recommend it to people who are in intimate relationships.
Yeah.
I think that if you're single, you know how with most books you forget the content quite
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
So let's say once you get into a relationship, maybe like I feel like it's you perceive it a bit differently. Especially it's funnier when you can play it off your partner as you're reading it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think I would recommend, but just start with the audiobook right away. Do not spend money on a regular book because either way he repeats the concept so many times that either way it goes into your brain, whether you're reading it or listening to it.
Yeah. I was telling Jania when we first started, I'm not an audiobook type of person usually, but with
Me
this one,
neither.
listen to it on audio, put it on like 1.5, and yeah, you'll get the concepts pretty quickly. Um, and I agree with you as well. I think if you're in a relationship, um, especially I think once you're at that stage where you know you're like you're serious, but you're really just getting really serious. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think this is a really great book. If you're single, I think you're gonna read it with a bit of, you know, kind of like you're gonna roll your eyes at some parts. Some parts you're gonna be like, yeah, that's true. But if you're single, read Why Men Love Bitches. That one is amazing.
Yeah, I agree, by the way. Oh, that's a good point. If you're single, read Why Men Love Bitches because then you can prep yourself
Yeah,
up for what to expect. And if you're
yeah.
in a relationship, you can read this book. But I have a feeling maybe you and I can discover more books like this where we could see what we align with more.
Yeah, and if anyone has recommendations, please send them in. And
Oh, for our next book club, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And one little thing, I don't know if you shared this or if you want to share this, how your partner applied some of the things from the book that you talked about, that you told him, and how it
Oh,
worked
yeah.
for him.
I guess to end this, yesterday he. Oh, I think I mentioned it in the podcast. No,
I don't
I
know,
mentioned
did
it on
you?
the episode. Yeah, I said that he had a problem with a colleague, and then he applied what I told him about the book,
I
and
don't think you did, Johnny. I think you were telling me before.
on FaceTime. Well, if I
Yeah,
didn't, when you watch this, we can see. But
yeah,
if I didn't, basically, talking about men listening to you, I was so surprised to be honest because usually I talk a lot and I don't know how much of it actually gets processed. But I was talking about the chapters in the book and how like women need just for their feelings to be validated, understood, and heard. And he was having problems with one of his colleagues. And he's like, I don't really understand what's going on. Like, I gave her all the solutions. Like, I don't understand why she's still upset. And then he called her after listening to me. He called her. He said that he applied the same tactic of just listening, validating the feelings, and then after that he got a green light. And he was so shooketh. He was like, "Oh my God, Johnny, what you're reading is actually could work for some people in certain contexts." And I'm like, "Yeah, like I guess they do."
wow. So yeah,
Yeah,
if your partner is being snooty about this book, tell him that it works.
yeah. Okay. Anyways, thank you so much for tuning into our show.
Thank you.
If you have suggestions for our next book club, it doesn't have to be dating related. Maybe it's a book that you really enjoyed.
Yeah.
Uh, please let us know, and we will see you next month.
Bye.
Bye.